So let's talk about this, Harry. Based on what you heard, the camera was disconnected, blood on the porch, her pacemaker was disconnected. The first question everybody is wondering is what are the chances that Nancy Guthrie is still alive? Your best guess.
Well, it's been a number of days, and I'm certainly not a medical expert, but for somebody that needs daily medication and uses a pacemaker, it's very concerning that this much time has passed. So I will tell you from experience that we will operate as though the victim is alive until we know that she isn't. And everything we do is expedited in a way that we're covering every tip possible, doing everything imaginable that we can
Mhm.
do to bring that person home safely, back to their family. So I think everybody is praying and
Yeah.
hopeful that she's still alive. But the longer it goes on, the more concerning that it goes, and especially if she doesn't have access to any of her medication, and her pacemaker is certainly a concern as well.
Which I'm
So.
so curious that the FBI or the sheriff mentioned that they're now talking with pharmacies in the area. Like if anybody re- asks for certain medication related to whatever her health ailments are, isn't that tipping off these possible abductors that, oh, well, then we shouldn't request the medication?
Well, it could. And again, as I mentioned, everything's kind of a measured response. Um, you know, I think it's certainly for lead value. I don't know if the suspects knew that Nancy had some of these health problems when they ended up abducting her. And they may have found that out. And now they realize that they want to keep this victim alive and don't want to be charged with murder. They got to find some resource for that medication.
Sure.
And so, certainly, contacting pharmacies and hospitals would be in line with that. And again, you walk a fine line, like how much information you release, and sometimes releasing some information like that may actually lead to some tips and things. People will say, well, somebody was just in here, asking for that particular kind of medication, and that would give law
Something.
enforcement some tips and value.
They released a timeline, which was quite specific, and you could tell there was this 45-minute window, if you will, between I think it was 1:45 or something like that. What does that 45-minute window of time tell you in terms of, when they saw that image of a person, even though the camera was disconnected, the system told them there was an image of somebody, and then her pacemaker being disconnected. What does that window tell you?
Well, it can tell us a lot. Again, according to the timeline, she got home about 9:48 p.m. The garage door went down around 9:50. Again, don't know, the relationship to that, whether she went in the front door or through the garage, whatever.
Or if she went in
Unlike
alone?
you,
Right? We
well,
don't really know if she
exactly.
went in alone.
That's right. And so a lot of that's unknown at this point. And to have the doorbell camera disconnected at 1:47 a.m. tells me that they were not aware that she did not have a subscription for the camera, for the video recording and that. And so, when you talk about how much a subject knows about their victim, it's possible they didn't know about her health issues. It's possible they didn't know that she didn't have a subscription for her video camera. So, whether or not that turns out to be significant or not in the investigation, we don't know. But to me, it speaks of they didn't know everything about her, that maybe they should have.
And to this point, we also don't know what happened in that time frame of whether or not something far worse took place within the home. We don't even know if she was
Right.
abducted alive.
Right. Well, and then, for her pacemaker to be disconnected at 2:28 a.m., again, that indicates she's out of range.
Hmm.
Um, and then certainly they indicated that the blood droplets have been tested and in fact come back to Nancy, which indicates some type of violence took place in there. Um, so what exactly it was, whether she resisted, whether they tried to, knock her unconscious or something to, help get her out. Again, those are all things that we don't know. But when you've got a blood trail, that's typically not a good sign.
The sheriff was adamant by saying, let me be clear, we don't have a suspect. We don't have a person of interest in this case. But then he also said, no one's been ruled out. What does that exactly mean then?
Well, I think in a lot of the cases that I've worked over my career, we had many, many tips called in, not only on kidnapping cases, but for example, the I-270 case with, we had 5,700 tips called in, and it was tip number 5,444 that led to the resolution of the case. So, on the one hand, they're saying, we have not ruled out anybody yet, but on the other hand, they're saying, we don't have a suspect. Um, I can tell you that we wouldn't announce that we have a suspect if we did until we knew what we were talking about. We had evidence necessary, and because if we indicate we have a suspect, they may panic and hurt or kill the
Yeah.
victim. So you really don't want to indicate too much that you have a true suspect in that. So I can understand why they're doing that. And the safe thing to say is we're not ruling anybody out.
Let's get to the ransom note, Harry. How common is it for someone to send a ransom note to a media outlet instead of the family?
Well, I've heard about incidents like that before where notes have gone to a media outlet and that. If you might have been around when the Thomas Lee Dillon case
Hmm.
was around. He ended up writing a letter to the Times Leader newspaper indicating that he was the killer of Jamie Paxton. And so, I mean, I've been involved in cases where they don't want to send it directly to law enforcement. They're afraid to do that, or to the media. So they pick some other, uh, where they feel it's safer for them to get the information to. And when you send it to the media, it's going to get some traction
Mm.
because they're going to run with that information and indicate that, hey, there's a ransom note out there. So, if I'm a suspect and I want to get attention on the case and everything and put pressure on law enforcement or the family, I'm going to send it to the media, and I know that it's not going to kept quiet. There's a ransom note
Yeah.
out there.
They waited some time, though, more than 24 hours before sending that. Is that just because they wanted to see what kind of play this would get first?
Well, I'm assuming that these individuals that are involved, and I got to believe, obviously, there's more than one. In order for all these things to have occurred, and that
Mm.
the abduction, I'm assuming that they had to watch the house and see when she came back, assuming it was targeted. So we're talking about multiple offenders here, and I just think that again, it's um, the kind of thing that. And I lost my train of thought on that.
No, that's okay.
Um,
I was saying for them to
the,
wait 24 hours to send
oh
that
yeah,
note to
I'm
the
sorry.
media. Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting that they waited that period of time, but I believe that they must have had a game plan of some kind in mind on their own timeline on what they wanted to do, and so
Hmm.
sending the ransom note could have been something that they planned to get out at a later time. We don't know exactly why that is, what events caused them to want to release a ransom note at that point, but I'm sure that it made perfect sense for the suspects involved for them to
Harry,
do it at that point.
and what about having two deadlines? That's something new that we learned today, where they actually had one deadline of today, 5 p.m., we're assuming Arizona time. But then the FBI came out and said, they also said another deadline of Monday. I've never heard of two different deadlines in a ransom note. Maybe you
Yeah,
have.
that's I don't recall ever having a case involving two different deadlines, but again, if you have to assume there was some planning involved in this abduction,
Hmm.
and it's very possible that the suspects believe that having the two deadlines was critical to their success. Um, when we look at it, at what occurred in that, some things don't make sense to you and I because we're thinking one way, or we're rationally thinking, what I would do in that situation. But we have to remember we're not the ones that are involved, and what they're doing may make perfect sense to them. It just doesn't right now. We don't understand why somebody would dedicate two different timelines or two different deadlines.
I'm sure, Harry, you saw the emotional plea from Savannah Guthrie and her siblings that they put out. And the FBI said today, that was a family decision. The FBI did not tell them to do that. We did consult with them, we did work with them, but that was their words. And Savannah said, we want proof of life. It sounds like the family is also maybe perhaps a little skeptical that she might be alive, but they said, we're willing to negotiate, so let's talk. Um, What's the strategy behind those chosen words from a family to these abductors?
Well, it is the ultimate. It's really the family's ultimate decision on whether, first of all, a ransom is paid. Um, the FBI has its critical incident response group there, which brings in all kinds of, behavioral analysis assistance and, all kinds of manpower in different areas and that are needed in this kind of a high-profile case. So I think the fact that the FBI is indicating that it's a family decision is in fact true.
Mhm.
I've been involved where families were reluctant to pay any kind of a ransom in that simply because they didn't believe that they would see their loved one anyway.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about a proof of life, I mean that's important. But back years ago, we didn't have AI where images and things can be manipulated. And I remember some cases where a newspaper would be held up with the today's edition of the newspaper,
Sure.
and that kind of indicates that that it was taken that particular day and that
Sure.
person was alive on that date. But anymore, with AI, you can't really tell, um, whether an image or video is
Mhm.
manipulated, and so it proof of
Excuse
life
me.
proof of life is still very critical,
Sure.
but you have to look at it with a jaundiced eye a
Sure.
little bit and understand that what you're thinking is present could have been taken several days ago, or the image could have been manipulated.
Excuse me,
And
Harry. Sorry.
we would oh, that's okay. We would never instruct the family to
A
pay a
ransom.
ransom. Um, I know the FBI has offered a $50,000 reward for information, and hopefully that will generate some additional tips and things. But as far as the reward go, the ransom demand, that's up to the family.
Yeah.
We try to educate the family based on our experience, whether it's usually successful, not successful, helpful, or not helpful. So, again, it's ultimately a family decision.
I'm going to end with this. I feel like we're at the stage where perhaps the family came out with that emotional plea, and the words chosen by the FBI today may be trying to reach the emotional quotient of these abductors to say, please bring her home. The FBI is saying she is an 84-year-old grandmother. That broke me hearing that, but struck me because it then turned this case into this is a grandma. Do you think the strategy of trying to tap into perhaps the emotion of this case might turn the tide?
Absolutely could, and we've done this over and over. What we want to try to do is humanize the victim, make them, relatable. She's my mom. She's a grandmother. She's a wonderful community person. She goes to church. You're appealing to all these different aspects of the individuals that are responsible for her abduction, trying to humanize her so that maybe they have a grandmother, or maybe something happened with their mother, and it kind of brings back those feelings, and it makes you realize that, hey, I've got this person's life in my hands right now, and she sounds like a wonderful person, and I don't want to be the person responsible for causing her death.
Mm.
And so it's a very common practice to make sure that we speak to, like we're talking to the suspects, and trying to humanize the victim so that they perhaps have some feelings about that. And ultimately, we want them to let her go, bring her home safely.
That is the ultimate mission out of all of this. Harry, thank you so much. And honestly, I can't remember the last time our country has really had such a high profile type kidnapping case with this kind of ransom note that has garnered international attention. Can you? I
Well,
mean,
I
this
mean,
is
you think back at, Elizabeth Smart, some of those cases,
sure,
and I can go on and mention, a number of them that kind of caught the national attention. But, the timing I think, has to be right in the country to, I think we're all kind of looking for a distraction right now with everything that's going on,
sure,
and then all of a sudden this this thing happens where this wonderful person has been kidnapped, and happens to be the mother of a famous news person, and it kind of caused the country to kind of focus away from some of the distressful things we're seeing
sure.
onto something maybe we all can unite about. Nobody's grandmother should be treated this way. Nobody's mother. And so I really think everything together, the timing was good, and hopefully it's going to lead to the successful resolution of the case.
Well, Harry Trombitas, thank you so very much. We always appreciate your insights after decades of your work with the FBI and law enforcement. This perspective is so valuable. Thank you, Harry. Good to see you.
You're welcome.